Section 94 of the Nigeria's 2022 Electoral Act prohibits election campaigns before 150 days to the date of the elections. How do we explain the sights of streets and billboards flooded with campaign posters? What implication does this hold for Nigeria's electoral landscape? Dr. Samson Itodo is the Executive Director, YIAGA Africa. He joins us on Arise Prime Time. Samson, glad to have you join us.
Thank you very much, and thanks for the doctorate title. I'm not yet a doctor.
Did I say doctor?
But thanks for wishing me best wishes. I really appreciate it.
It's all right. Glad to have you all the same. Well, yesterday I was discussing with Farouk Adamu. He's of the APC. Farouk Adamu Aliyu. He was former House of Reps minority leader. He's of the APC. And he said that INEC should wield the big stick, even against his own party, if found wanting in this question of flouting the electoral law. He blames INEC. So, what do you think about his comments on the fact that INEC should wield the big stick, and if there's anyone to blame, it should be INEC?
I think the big question is, why should an institution, be blamed when, to a large extent, there are certain gaps within the law? I think whoever is asking INEC to be blamed should check first, in the first place, why is a political party, or perhaps even an aspirant, engage in public campaigns when they know the provisions of the law? So asking INEC to wield the big stick, yes, quite a good call, but I think it's actually double standards in my own view. Yes, INEC should wield the big stick. Let's look at the provisions of Section 94 of the Act. It talks about the time frame for the commencement of campaigns. Our campaigns shall not commence not earlier than 150 days and not later than 24 hours to the day of election. So the time frame for campaigns have been established by law. But it goes further to say that any political party or any individual or any person acting on behalf of a political party, commits an offense if you engage in premature campaign. And the penalty is what? Is just 500,000 naira. That's what Section 95 of the Act says. But you look at INEC's guidelines, it is very clear. The prescriptions of the law regarding the time frame for conducting primaries are very clear. So when we say INEC should wield the big stick, yes, INEC is a regulatory institution, but the bulk actually stops at the security agencies. Now, if you're saying INEC, should wield the big stick, what would INEC do? The best INEC can do is to do what? Impose or invoke the provisions of the Constitution, which is impose the 500,000 naira fine. But that has to go through the prosecutorial process that we have. And in any case, if you have, for instance, in the FCT, where you have billboards, across the entire city, you can clearly see campaigns have begun. There are politicians, whether they are APC, ADC, Labour Party, PDP, who have been involved in premature
For example,
campaigns.
this one you're seeing now is...
Why is it that the law enforcement agencies are not pulling down those billboards, knowing fully well that it runs foul of provisions of the law? Okay, because they are clear campaigns. But one of the arguments people have made was that, yes, these billboards are erected by individuals and what you call movements, that they are not political parties, and you cannot establish whether those movements or association are conducting those campaigns on behalf of a political party. In fact, it even makes it worse, because whether they are conducting the campaigns on behalf of a political party, they are engaged in early campaigns, and campaigns are limited to what? Political parties. So I expect that the law enforcement agencies would actually prevail on those individuals, because when you think about prosecution of electoral offenses, it rests squarely on three pillars. The first one is arrest, the second is investigation, and the third one is prosecution. The law says INEC should prosecute, but INEC does not have the capacity for arrest. It doesn't have capacity for investigation. So the security agencies, especially the police, also needs to be brought into the discussion. That why are they, just silent when the laws are being broken by political actors?
Okay, so the security agencies have the power to go pull down the billboards or remove these campaign posters. That's what you're saying.
That's exactly what we're saying. It's within their remits, for heaven's sake. The law is clear that you should not engage in what campaigns not earlier than 150 days. You just look at the entire country. It just feels like we've got elections this weekend. And so people have abandoned governance and focused more on politicking and just electioneering. INEC has not issued timetable for the 2027 elections.
They're not.
Party primaries have not been conducted. Why is it that these actors are involved in what? In early and premature campaigns. And it's just across board. And it's just sad. It just tells you the level of impunity that you've got the political elite that are not playing the game of politics by its rules.
You talked about the penalty. Because I was going to ask you, what is the penalty for flouting these laws?
It's just 500,000.
But you've mentioned it. Do you think that's a deterrent? 500,000, half a million?
No, 500,000
to parties?
No, it's not a deterrence. I think that we need to impose stiffer sanction. And the point needs to be made that when premature campaigns becomes the order of the day, what suffers is governance.
I was going to come to
right?
that.
That's what suffers. Because there are people who still have the mandate of the people to rule for 4 years. It's just mid-term, just 2 years, into office. And all we're thinking about is February 20th, 2027, when we've not even come out of the economic hardship that Nigerians are experiencing, the issues around insecurity. There are fundamental problems that people are dealing with.
The floods.
And I thought that across board, whether it's at the state or at the federal level, that the priority will be focused on what? On delivering the dividends of democracy to the people.
Yes, you talked
but
about.
That is not the case. Instead, every political consultation, right, is what? Is a political campaign. So you see, what you call, whether they're rallies or even visits, all of that are just marked. Okay. Those are campaigns that are marked as whether rallies or political consultations.
You brought up two issues which are going to try to trash the question of governance, all of that. Let me just ask you straight away, where do you place, for purposes of understanding, for those who are watching and for Nigerians generally, where do you place defections, endorsements, membership drives, when talking about campaigns? Where do you place those?
No, first, when you look at defections, within our constitutional jurisprudence, people who are members of political parties can cross carpet if there is a conflict in their political party. The law is clear on that. But that law is also problematic because what we have seen is a weaponization of democratic instruments to advance partisan, interests that are at variance with our collective good. And what do I mean? The law says when there's a division. You and I know very well that some of the conflicts and crises within political parties are instigated intentionally. In fact, what we have seen is when there is a semblance of a tension that has not degenerated into a conflict or a division within parties, people just cross carpet because they are looking for what? They're looking for alibis and excuses just to justify the fact that they are cross carpeting. But there's also another dimension to it, that are people cross carpeting because of division, or they are being intimidated or coerced, or is as a result of the determination for political survival. And I see some of those movements are pretty much politicians who don't have the resilience to stand and question political authority, who always think that their livelihood is dependent on their proximity to power, they continue to move, defying all odds and betraying the trust that people have put in them. And my principal position, which aligns with a lot of people, is that when you canvass for votes under a particular party, and people trust you, and they give your party that vote, the Supreme Court said that votes in an election belong to
the
a party. The honorable thing to do is to vacate that seat and go to that party and run for office under that party and allow the party to nominate another person to occupy that seat. Because this movement that you see, regardless of the fact that people have a right of association, but you cannot exercise that right in a manner that undermines the interest and the sovereignty of the people.
Of the people who voted
you into power.
Apparently that is not happening.
We need our laws to be tightened in a way that it makes it difficult for people to cross carpet. And even when they do, they should vacate those seats.
Let me even take you back to this question of justiciability. Police arrests, it gets down to investigation.
Yes.
Then INEC prosecutes. How will this work out? Because to me, it seems like even if you get the people who are committing these offenses, it will take a whole gamut to even go prosecute them. You're a lawyer. How can this be applied effectively and efficiently to deter this flouting of the electoral law from happening?
Yes, there are challenges with our criminal justice system, no doubt. But we've also seen cases where the law has had its full course.
And there are precedents.
No, there are precedents, but not in the case of premature campaigns, because I think Nigerians need to know that there's the legal framework needs to be strengthened. And we need to institute laws that clearly criminalize premature campaigns by third parties, whether or not they conduct those campaigns for and on behalf of a political party. Because what the law currently says, under Section 94, is that any political party or any person acting on behalf, and that is what these phony organizations are capitalizing on, because you do not see any party insignia on those campaign materials or those billboards. So they're exploiting a gap within the law. But I've also made the argument that INEC, by virtue of the powers vested on it, can actually limit the exercise or the overreach that we see on the part of these political actors. And I say that, one, if a party engages in premature campaigns, they are breaking the law. So perhaps they could be disqualified, from even participating in the elections, in addition to the 500,000 naira fine. Because what we do is we put a lot of pressure on the political system. And just look at what's happening within the politics.
But you don't have that in the law.
You don't have that
disqualification.
In the law. Yeah. No, you don't have that. With respect to premature campaigns.
Yeah.
The other sanction that you see is when you engage in campaigns 24 hours, before the date of an election. So we need to deal with that. When you talk about, the prosecution, listen, all the actors in the election value chain would need to be committed to credible, inclusive elections.
And that's what politicians are not willing to do.
If that commitment is not there, then there's no way even INEC can attempt to prosecute, these offenders. Because you need the judiciary. Of course, INEC is not a court. It cannot prosecute.
Yep.
So you need the security agencies to arrest, right? And then investigate, and perhaps institute legal action against these people. And I say this, that we're spending time arresting citizens who are demanding accountability from government, citizens who are asking questions, citizens whose rights have been infringed upon. Those are the people that we are so quick to arrest, intimidate, and prosecute. But the same political actors who are breaking our laws, we are not reprimanding them. And so it just appears we're a banana republic, and everyone has just gone rogue, and no one is calling them to action.
No one is checkmating them.
And this is why INEC, and I thought that, yes, even though it was the CPS, the Chief Press Secretary, I think for an action like this, INEC should issue a bold statement to the political parties. I am aware that in the course of the meetings with the political parties it was mentioned, but that is not enough. It needs to issue a strong statement and caution the political parties, because INEC is a regulatory institution and it has the powers, and it can also stretch its powers. And that's why what you call bureaucratic activism. INEC can stretch its powers and will still not be found wanting.
So you're agreeing with what I have here, that INEC needs to, at this juncture, issue formal public order to stakeholders, especially political parties, to desist from.
I totally agree. In fact, 2 months ago, on June 5th, 7 civil society organizations did write to INEC, calling on INEC to issue a public statement or perhaps an advisory to the political parties. And I think it's important because the primaries will not hold until perhaps March, April next year. So we're just about 7 months. And just think about it. If as at today, which is August, everywhere is littered with campaign posters and billboards, or you see all cars, and then also the media is saturated with a lot of information about campaigns, and you see all the debates on social media, all of that hate and toxicity is just driven by the fact that we are approaching an election season. We're not there yet, but it feels like we're there. And it's really sad for our politics. No country makes progress by just focusing on elections and not demanding quality governance. And it's a deliberate attempt by the political class to distract us from asking the fundamental governance questions, because people have been vested with power, in trust for people. They need to deliver on their campaign promise and not get distracted by the next elections.
You've answered my question on the CSOs, what they are doing, but I wonder whether they are doing enough, and the electorate, what should they be doing as well. But do you see all this placing any kind at all of pressure on the electoral environment, and what amount of pressure will this be on the environment, and how does this invariably affect governance, public trust, and does it in any way limit equitable participation?
Absolutely, because you can't succeed as a country without public trust. Now, where every government action is being assessed, is being analyzed from the lenses and the prisms of electioneering, it becomes problematic. And it's not even good for the government of the day, whether at the federal or at the national level, because there are altruistic and objectives that government seek to have. There are people-centered programs that government introduces, right? But you cannot cultivate and build trust from the people when you're also distracted with elections. Because what people would say is that, oh, they are doing this because of the next elections. So it means that it is not genuine.
Yeah, you hear it, you hear it here and there.
Right? And that is not good for the polity. That is not good for democratic legitimacy. The second is, all the other institutions are under pressure, because when the entire environment is charged, if you look at what happens on social media in the last 1 week or the last few days,
I was even going to come to the question of social media.
There are a lot of toxicity on those platforms. Why? Because we're now approaching the election season, because certain individuals who have also not helped matters have made definitive statements about the 2027 election. And I wished that, they limited themselves to personal political expression and not necessarily get involved in premature campaigns. Because what is done,
an example of what you're talking about.
It's heated the polity. So when you look at the PDP, you look at the ADC, you look at the Labour Party, including the APC, you see all sorts of, endorsement. People have declared publicly that they are going to run for office in 2027, and they're going to do this, they're going to do that. All of that heats up the polity. It puts pressure. And so everybody, becomes very, they're all on alert, right? And you look at the Electoral Commission itself. it would also be put under intense pressure, because INEC that should be bothered about planning for the next couple of elections that we have.
It's busy.
But it's busy, right? You have conflicts and crisis within all the political parties. The commission is dragged into all forms of leadership squabbles, right? And that is not what an election management body needs, especially an election management body that is going to go through a major transition in the next few months, because the INEC chairman is going to leave. His term has come to an end. It will come to an end in December, so he's going to leave. What we should be bothered about is who becomes the next INEC chairman. Citizens should be calling on the president to say, before you send any nomination to the National Assembly, tell us who you want to appoint. Ask us to submit petitions if those people don't meet the certain criteria, because the kind of commissioners we need are commissioners and INEC officials who have never been members of political party,
Let
present
me just
or past.
ask you this, a yes or no, because I don't have the time. Do you think INEC is independent?
It is our considered view at YIAGA Africa, and we've said this over and over again, that we have a captured electoral commission, and we have provided reasons for holding that view. Because one, you can clearly see even from recent elections that there have been successive attempts by the ruling political class to undercut the Electoral Commission. You cannot say INEC is independent when you have people with clear partisan leanings as appointed as commissioners and INEC. You cannot say INEC is independent when you have, returning officers and we can go on and on. But INEC can be independent. This is why Nigerians need to place attention on who becomes the next INEC chairman and national commissioner.
All right, Samson Itodo is the executive director of YIAGA Africa. Thank you for being on Prime.
Always a delight to be here.
All right, you've just finished watching Arise Prime Time. We'll be back tomorrow with another edition. Stay with us.